Yo, what is up, doggies? It's your boy Beanie Colon, and today I'm in a storytelling mood. And lucky for y'all, I got more stories than a fucking, picture book, man. I got a lot of stories. And today I'm gonna hit y'all with what I can only describe as just the dumbest acid trip I've ever had. The acid trip wasn't really particularly bad or particularly good, but throughout this trip, I undoubtedly made some of the stupidest decisions you could possibly make while tripping sack. And in my humble opinion, it makes for a gas story. And not only a gas story, but also a good representation of what not to do if you're tripping absolute sack. So, if you're worried you're gonna do some stupid shit when you're tripping sack and you've never done it before, or maybe you're considering it, just watch this video and make sure you do everything the complete opposite of what I do. But shit, dog, without any further ado, let's just get right into this story. Unlike most of the other trip reports on my channel, this story takes place when I had very little experience with psychedelics. This was probably my third or fourth time taking acid, so I kinda knew what to expect, but I also still kinda had no idea what to expect because each one of my trips had just been so vastly different and wild. But yeah, I recall copping this acid right after work at 11 o'clock at night, and I remember I also copped a half ounce with this acid, so I was making big plays. And then I remember I just dropped the acid in the car on the drive back before I even went home to see if either my parents were awake or what the situation was at home. So yeah, already making pretty horrendous decisions right off the bat. First off, tripping sack right when you come off work is not really a good idea because, me personally, and I'm sure a lot of other people would agree, that work kinda just makes them feel like shit, and you probably don't want to go on an acid trip when you feel like shit. And then also, the arguably more stupid thing is the fact that I was dropping this acid without knowing whether or not my parents were awake or asleep, because if they were awake, this would have been a very, very bad situation. And also, it's probably not smart to, drop acid while you're still driving. Even if it probably won't kick in while you're driving, it's still a pretty bad idea. But yeah, I ended up making it home without the SID kicking in while I was driving, and both my parents were asleep, so everything seemed good, and it seemed like dropping the acid in the car ride home was definitely the play, because it was nearly right when I got home this acid kicked in. And I didn't really have any ideas of what I was going to do when I was tripping sack, so I remember I just went downstairs, hopped on my PS4, and just started chilling out, tripping sack, gaming, just having a good time. After about 30 minutes of gaming, I remember I ended up getting a text from one of my close friends, the same friend who was with me in my first time tripping acid trip report, and for the sake of the story, I'm just gonna call him Rob. So, Rob hits me up with the "what you doing?" I tell Rob tripping absolute sack with a bunch of bag, and clearly Rob, being a fan of weed and tripping absolute sack, hits me back with the "yo, we gotta link up." And Rob's the fucking homie, so I'm obviously for sure, dog, pull the fuck up. Issue is, Rob could not drive, nor did he have anyone that could drive, and Rob hit me with the "any chance you could just drive over here?" And well, as I was saying about me making a bunch of really stupid decisions throughout this trip, I decided to respond back with, "yeah, I could drive over it, it's not too far." Now, to be fair, it really wasn't too far. It was a 5-minute drive, but you definitely under no circumstance should ever drive when you're tripping sack. It doesn't matter if it's a 2-minute drive or if you're just pulling out of the driveway. You shouldn't get behind the wheel when you're tripping absolute sack. But anyways, back to the story. So there I was, absolutely tripping sack behind the wheel. I remember driving this car thinking I was in a fucking spaceship. I should not have been behind the wheel. I was driving around with one foot on the gas pedal and one foot on the brake pedal. I had forgotten how to drive. I remember when I first started driving, trying to get used to this whole driving while tripping sack thing, I just kept hitting the gas pedal, then the brake, then the gas pedal, then the brake, and I just kept stopping and starting my car just in the middle of the road. I am most certainly not obliging by the laws of the road. But yeah, I'm out here driving this fucking spacecraft trying to get to the homie's house, and it ends up dawning on me after 3 minutes that I had no fucking idea where I was going. The kid lived pretty fucking close to me, so it really shouldn't have been that hard to find this dude's house, but the thing is, when you're tripping sack and the trees are spinning around, it's kind of hard to keep track of where you're going. So once I realized I have no idea where I am, I realized this is a bit of a problem, so I decided to FaceTime my friend on Snapchat so he could help me navigate how to get to his house. I most definitely could have just put his house address into a GPS and then just had my phone show me how to get there, but as I was saying before, this is the trip of terrible ideas, so I decided to FaceTime this kid while tripping absolute sack and driving a car. And somehow, while I'm doing all this idiotic stuff, I did manage to get to the kid's house, and I'm not really even sure how, because I remember when I FaceTimed the kid for the directions, he was very little help. I remember the whole thing just making me much more confused, trying to focus on talking to this kid while driving, while tripping sack. It was just too much for me, but somehow I made it to the kid's house. So once I'm at his house, my dog and his little brother both come outside, and Rob's little brother was also the homie. Like, I remember this kid would basically just do anything for us. Like, he would always just like get us food, make us shit. I remember one time when me and Rob were chiefing, I asked Rob's little bro if he wanted to join the Ash Club, and dude said yeah, so I ashed out my blunt on his arm and left him with like a burn blister the next day. And the little bro was hyped up to be in the Ash Club. Like, basically what I'm trying to say is, this kid was down for anything, man. So there I am, reunited with the boys, and you know, everything seems to be going great. I made it to the kid's house okay, we're about to start chiefing, we're about to be getting lit. But I remember my boy Rob very quickly asked me if I had any more acid that he could get. And I did have more acid, but the problem was I had left the acid at home. So I tell Rob about this issue, and I tell him there's low chance I'm hopping behind the wheel again, because that shit was scary as fuck. But Rob really wanted to trip some sack, and I mean, I can't blame him. When you're hanging out with a homie who's tripping absolute sack, it kinda sucks when you're not tripping sack. Because the dude tripping sack's just gonna want to stare at the carpet and play with the trees, and I mean, if you're not tripping absolute balls, these activities don't sound very fun. So Rob, trying to trip some sack, offers to drive us all over to my house, grab the acid, and then he would drive us back. So me tripping absolute balls, making horrible decisions, I say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And Rob, by the way, did not have his license yet. He still had his temps and was still learning how to drive. But the way I saw it is, at least he wasn't tripping absolute balls, so it seemed safer to have him drive us than if I were driving. And I mean, the kid did get us there no problem. I do remember at one point when he was driving, the kid just started going like 70 miles per hour because there was no one else on the road. And I remember I was not a fan of this dog speeding up to 60. I was like, hey yo dog, I'm literally tripping on acid with a half ounce of weed, having my homie drive me who doesn't have his driver's license. Please just go the speed limit. After I say this, the homie indeed does go the speed limit, and we make it to my house perfectly fine. So I went in my house and I grabbed the acid for Rob, and I remember also after this, we went behind my house and we smoked a couple blunts, just having a good time. Like, I was out here making all these stupid, like, erratic decisions, and normally when I was tripping sack, I feel like that would get in my head and I would be having a bad time. But I remember chiefing behind my house being just such a fantastic time. It was like a warm summer night. We're just chiefing blunts, tripping on acid. Like, the vibes were flowing, man. After we finished these blunts, we decided we had to drive back to Rob's house because, well, Rob and his little brother was with me, and I mean, they needed to get home. So I remember I have Rob drive us back to his house, even though I'm pretty sure at this point he was already kind of tripping sack. But shit, I mean, Rob got us back to his crib safe and sound. So we all go up into Rob's house, and my plan is basically just chill over at Rob's house till like 6 or 7 in the morning, then drive back home when I'm not tripping that hard, because both my parents thought that I was asleep at home, so by the time they woke up, I had to be at my house. So me and Rob tripping absolute sack, both going to his basement, and I remember we were both just like staring at the pictures in his basement, like he had this one of a horse, and when you're looking at that shit while you're tripping sack, like you can literally see the horse galloping through fields, like it's some wild shit. So the first like 30 minutes are going absolutely great. It's just me and Rob tripping absolute sack with his little brother just like observing us, just asking us questions. Like, it was a great time. But after like 30 minutes of this, I start getting phone calls from my mom. And at this point, it's like 3 in the morning, so what had happened is my mom had somehow realized my car was not at home, and she realized I wasn't at home, and she definitely knew I was up to some shenanigans. So my mom calls me like 30 times, and I'm just watching each phone call go by, absolutely just tripping out. Like, it's an indescribable feeling when your mom starts calling you while you're tripping sack on acid. Like, I think a decent amount of people could actually relate to this, and if you can, like, you know what I'm talking about. Like, imagine going from tripping absolute balls, having a great time, exploring this new dimension, and then your mom calls you, and then you just get stuck in these thought loops of how much trouble I'm in, how can I get away with this, does she know that I'm tripping on acid? A phone call from your mother while you're tripping sack will be sure to tweak you out. So there I am, just absolutely tweaked out, thought loops in full force. All I can think about is just, oh, my mom definitely knows I'm tripping sack on acid. And you know, having the little bro there who wasn't tripping sack actually kind of really helped me get out of this thought loop, because basically my main worry was that somehow my mom would just know that I'm tripping on acid. But in reality, you know, the little bro told me it's more likely she just thinks that you just snuck out, and she wouldn't have any real reason to believe that I'm doing acid. And I mean, he's 100% correct. All she knew was that I snuck out. But the thing is, when you're tweaking out on acid, you start having some irrational thoughts, and in my head, I was just like, oh, she called me while I'm tripping? That means she definitely knows that I'm tripping sack on acid. I remember I struggled with these thought loops for like 2 hours, and then at some point, I just come to the realization that This shit's way too confusing to try to figure out while I'm tripping sack, and I'll just deal with it tomorrow when I'm sober. So I remember I chill out with the bro Rob for like 2 or 3 more hours up until like 5 in the morning. And basically, I remember the whole time we were just on Netflix watching a bunch of trippy shows. And also, Rob being Rob, if you watch my first acid trip story when he turned on like this UFO video, when we were on Netflix, Rob did turn on 2 different horror movies. One of them was Coraline, which I was actually heavily fucking with, but the dog Rob literally turned it off after like 2 minutes after the opening screen, which the opening screen was like the trippiest thing I had ever seen. I actually am really mad we didn't watch that whole movie. And I remember this dude Rob also turned on this horror movie called Hush. This movie we also only watched like 5 minutes of, but we got to one part where they were doing sign language, and it looked just so fucking dope. Like, it looked like these dudes were doing some like anime shinjitsu movements with their hands. Like, it looked wild. Like, I remember me and Rob just both looked at each other when they were doing the ASL, and we were like, this is some dope ass shit. But yeah, once like 6 in the morning hits, the homie Rob tells me that he has football at like 9 a.m. the next day, and that he needs to go to sleep. And mind you, Rob had taken his acid at like 1 in the morning, so I don't know how he was planning on going to sleep. But Rob ends up taking out a fat thing of melatonin and drops literally like 6 of them, and he gives me like 3 of them to take as well, because I told him I also wanted to just go to sleep at this point. So I take the 3 melatonins, and Rob also tells me that in his brother's bedroom there's an extra bed. So I go into his brother's room and climb on top of his top bunk where there's an extra bed, and literally underneath me, his 2 younger brothers were sleeping. One of them was the one that was actually with us when I was tripping sack, and then his other little brother, who is like 6 years old, was also asleep in that bed underneath me. I remember I tried to go to sleep for like 30 minutes, but it was just absolutely no luck. I was just getting lost in the void when I would close my eyes. So I gave up on trying to go to sleep, and I ended up finding headphones and an iPhone charger on top of my bed, which was just such a godsend, because I remember from this point on, I was just chilling out on YouTube, watching trippy videos, just having the time of my life. Like, I wasn't even thinking about it all, the fact that my mom just called me. So I chilled on YouTube for quite some time, and then I remember when like 8 or 9 in the morning hits, the sun, you know, it started coming out, and I remember the sun coming through the window was going like right onto my friend's little brother's face, who was like 6 years old. And I remember I was just staring at this kid for like 5 minutes with just the sun beaming in on his face, just absolutely lost in his face, just tripping sack. And I remember while I'm staring at him, he literally just started to wake up, and I remember like while he was waking up, I started like hiding from him, and I was just like spying on him from afar. And I remember I thought there was like no chance that he noticed me, even though I was literally just like staring at him. I thought he couldn't see me from my angle. But this little bro ends up going out of my view sight for like 3 seconds, and then he just jumps up on top of my bed. He's like, "What are you doing here?" And you know, I just tell the kid I'm just chilling, and the kid being 6 years old, you know, he didn't really think anything of it, and he just starts going over to his TV and starts gaming. And you know, I see this opportunity of playing with this 6-year-old kid while I'm tripping absolute sack, and I take advantage of this opportunity. I go over to the TV and I start hanging out with this little bro. I'm just sitting there watching him play video games, making the goofiest comments you could possibly think of. I remember multiple times the kid did ask me, he's like, "Why are you acting so weird?" And I would just be like, "Why are you acting so weird?" It was a fantastic time. Like, I was just hanging out with this little 6-year-old, and I mean, like, when you drop acid, it kind of gives you the mind of a 6-year-old. So like, we were getting along great. Tripping sack with children, it's honestly a great time. But after gaming with the little bro for like an hour or 2, we end up hearing a knock on the door, and I remember the little bro's like, "Who's that?" And then I look at my phone and also see that I'm getting a bunch of phone calls from my mom. My mom had tracked my phone and seen that I had gone to my boy's Rob house, and she had came over to end the shenanigans. So my mom's at the house, and you know, I knew this was coming. I didn't really think it was going to come so early, but you know, I was kind of ready for it. So I was about ready to go outside to my mom, but then I realized I had no shoes on. When I had driven over to my friend's house tripping sack, I forgot to add I never put any shoes on. And I can only imagine my mom would find it quite strange if I had driven over to my friend's house at 11 o'clock at night with no shoes on. So I ran over to Rob's room, woke him up. Somehow he had managed to fall asleep. I don't know how, but I wake him up, tell him I need some shoes. The homie quickly blesses me with some flip-flops, and we're good to go. So I open up this door, still kinda tripping sack, and obviously my mom is not happy with me. But I remember I basically like just barely talked to her and just went straight to my car and drove home. Also, I remember on this drive home when I was still kinda tripping sack, I hit a fat left turn on a red light, and I was like 3 inches off of smashing into this other car coming across. But I ended up making it home safe and sound, and I ended up securing my half ounce back into my room without getting caught, which was pretty clutch. I remember my mom gave me like one last talking to in my room, and I don't really even remember what she was saying, but I remember when she was talking to me, I just saw her face like morphing around, like one of her eyeballs would get way bigger than anything else on her body, and then it would shrink down, and then something else would grow. Like, her face was looking very wacky. And I don't know, seeing your own mother's face just like twist and turn into these weird things while she's yelling at you and upset with you, it's not a good experience. But yeah, that was probably one of the dumbest acid trips I've ever had. A lot of really stupid decisions just made throughout that entire trip. And I mean, obviously, don't do anything that I did in this video, because I mean, this video is about stupid things I did when I was on acid. Like, just because I drove on acid and didn't die or didn't get pulled over doesn't mean that you should try it, because you most likely are going to get pulled over or crash. And also, this acid trip just kind of shows why you need to plan out some activities or some things that you can do before you start tripping sack. Because if you don't, you might make some wild, stupid decisions that you would never normally make if you weren't tripping absolute balls. Well, that's basically all I got for y'all. If you enjoyed, please drop a like, a comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And also, we're nearing 500 subscribers, so if you guys are trying to drop some like Q&A questions in the comments, you know, give me some content for my 500 subscriber special, that would be great. But yeah, that's all I've got. As always, peace out, doggies.